The cinematic world of Harry Potter has a ridiculous amount of characters. As there's so many in the books, it makes sense. But it's hard to believe there's any characters that didn't make it to the big screen. But skim through a few pages of the legendary series, and you'll notice some unfamiliar names. And here's my top 10 Harry Potter characters that never made it to the big screen. Number 10, Hepzibah Smith. Now, the story of Hepzibah Smith is more in detail told in The Half-Blood Prince, although it's rather brief. And Hepzibah Smith was an avid collector who would frequently go into Borgin and Burke's and look for rare, expensive items to purchase. And while she ran in there one day, she befriended Tom Riddle. And as we all know, Tom Riddle became Lord Voldemort, and this eventually led to Voldemort going to her house and eventually killing her and taking the Hufflepuff cup. This was eventually turned into a Horcrux, and then after it was taken, Tom Riddle poisoned Hepzibah Smith, and although she's not an incredibly deep character, it would have been pretty cool to see her in the movies. Number 9, Teddy Lupin. Now, Teddy Lupin is Lupin's and Tonk's son, and he is talked about very briefly at the end of the Deathly Hallows. And to be fair, there really isn't a lot of time to bring this character to the big screen. He could maybe be shown in the epilogue, but that's really all that we would have seen out of Teddy Lupin, and he is talked about a lot more in The Cursed Child. And that's why he's a little bit lower on the list, but so he could have fit in rather nicely in the epilogue with Albus and James, and some of the other kids with older Hermione, Harry, and Ron. Number 8, the Muggle Prime Minister. Now, in The Half-Blood Prince, the book starts off with the Prime Minister, the Muggle Prime Minister, explaining how he was informed of the wizarding world and interactions with Cornelius Fudge, and really just an interesting bridge between the wizarding world and the Muggle world. And I think that would have worked really well in the movies, because it would have shown how that secrecy is kept and that there is a communication to the Prime Minister. It's briefly mentioned in the movies about notifying the Prime Minister, I believe, in The Half-Blood Prince. But seeing that may have opened up the wizarding world a little bit for us in the audience, at least on the big screen. Number 7, Charlie Weasley. Now, we see all of the other Weasleys throughout the films. We see Percy, even Bill towards the later ones, and obviously Ron, Fred, George, Ginny. And we see all of these characters except for Charlie. And Charlie is obviously known in the books as he works with dragons and is really never home. So it's understood why he never really makes an appearance. But seeing all of the Weasleys except for Charlie, it would have been nice to complete the entire family on the big screen and just see that interaction and see that, even if just for the Battle of Hogwarts, as he was in that battle as well. So seeing that would have been cool. Number 6, Ludo Bagman. Now, Ludo Bagman was a world famous Quidditch player that got in trouble after his Quidditch playing days because he gave some information to a Death Eater. And he didn't really know what he was doing, but he was put on trial and then let go because he was a Quidditch player. It was a bit of a weird trial, and they started cheering and applauding after he was done being tried because he was world famous and everyone loved him. And he's kind of a knucklehead, and he's in the Goblet of Fire, and that's where he flourishes. He's a really fun character to read about. He's outgoing, funny, but he's also in some gambling debt with the goblins and is avoiding goblins. It's a really fun, interesting character to keep an eye on throughout the Goblet of Fire, and it would have been cool to include him and maybe add a little bit more comedy to the Goblet of Fire, the movie. Number 5, Professor Binns. Now, Professor Binns is an interesting character in that he's not really an interesting character. He died in Hogwarts as a teacher and then came back to teach again, and teaches as a ghost. And in the books, he's the most boring teacher ever. He sits and drones on about stuff that's not really that important, and occasionally, I believe it's in one of the first 2 books, he actually relays some important information to the plot, but it wasn't really on purpose. He's a funny character in how boring he is, and it would have been fun to see him in the movies just as that boring kind of comical character that everyone's just like, let's get this over with. Number 4, Augusta Longbottom, or Neville Longbottom's grandma. Now, Augusta Longbottom is one of the sassiest witches in the entire wizarding world. She's a fantastically fun character who is always on Neville to be the best wizard that he can be, and although it comes off as strong and like a cranky old grandma sometimes, it's really more of a funny way that she does it. And as a character, even in the Deathly Hallows, if she would have been introduced, she was in the Battle of Hogwarts and even escaped. 2 Death Eaters came to her door to capture her, to kind of slow down Neville from continuing to cause trouble at Hogwarts, and she fought him off and was on the run. So she's a very strong character, she's strong-willed, and she would have been an incredible addition to the cinematic universe of Harry Potter. Number 3, the Gaunts. Now, the story of the Gaunts is a rather dark and depressing one. The father being Marvolo, moving down to the daughter and son Merope, not quite sure, or Morphin. And with these characters, Marvolo and Morphin are really dark and angry and violent wizards that are known for hating Muggles and Muggle-borns. The story of Voldemort's parents comes from the Gaunts, and that's what's so interesting and what would have been a fantastic addition to the cinematic universe, as we got some great backstory into the early life of Voldemort in the movies. We got to see a flashback of him in the orphanage, and even getting some information out of Professor Slughorn. But finding out how he was born and how his mother died and how she seduced his dad by using magic and then him leaving, it really would have added a little bit more depth to Voldemort in the movies. And I know there's only so much time in a movie, but this, I think, was a very important piece of information that would have worked really well in the Half-Blood Prince. Number 2, Winky. Now, Winky is Barty Crouch Sr.'s house elf and is a huge part of the Goblet of Fire book. And Winky is a big inspiration for Spew, which is also never talked about in the movies. But that's Hermione's organization for house elf welfare and getting better treatment for them. And she's incredibly important to the plot in that she takes the fall for Barty Crouch Jr., launching the Dark Mark into the sky after the Death Eaters invade the Quidditch World Cup in the beginning. And that's something that's glossed over, and she would have been tougher to fit in there, but I think having more house elves is something that a lot of people would have liked to see in the cinematic universe. And number 1, Peeves. Peeves the Poltergeist loves chaos and mischief. He is constantly causing trouble in the hallways, throwing stuff at students, screaming to wake people up. He is always causing trouble and really bringing comedy to some dark situations, especially in the Order of the Phoenix, messing with Dolores Umbridge. I think that would have made a great addition to the Order of the Phoenix, as he is constantly a thorn in her side, and we all hate Dolores Umbridge. So seeing Peeves go after her, throw stuff at her, doing anything he can to get in her way is something that would have been incredible to see on the big screen. And even in the other movies too, and seeing him a part of the Wizarding World and Hogwarts would have been incredible. So that's it for this one, guys. Let me know what you guys think and what characters I might have missed on this list. And if you want to see more content like this, like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.